All right, we'd like to welcome you to Utah Valley University. We've got a big crowd. You guys want to let them know what you thought of the movie? Thank you so much for waking up early for us, and I'm so sorry about running a little late. For us, it's late. For you, it's early. So,
Yeah,
what we're going to do, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then they're going to come up and ask questions. If you have a question, go ahead and just kind of line up here. That would be great. This is such a beautiful movie, such an extraordinary movie. We've had for the past couple of weeks, a lot of the people in this group have been watching several of your other movies. It's just been such for us in Utah, in this very different part of the world, very rural United States state that we're in here. I'm sure we're seeing, we're really opening the eyes of these students to a whole nother way of storytelling and beautiful, beautiful images. I just have a few questions, then I really want them to ask the questions. So I'd love to just ask about like how this movie came about and what was the inspiration for the stories, and then maybe how you were able to pull it together. I know in the beginning there's a long list of like co-producers and companies and so people from all over, and it seems like it was a real international sort of approach to get it made, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne, and thanks to everyone for watching. The way it came together, I would say it started with, okay, like to give a bit more context, it started with after I had made my second feature, Ota, in 2015. And what happened was with that film, it was very personal film, very sort of experimental, like semi-autobiographical film about this, the town that I was born and raised in, Owerri, also known as Old Town. And nothing really came out of the film. Like it sort of did a few festivals, won a couple of awards here and there, some nominations, and then just sort of disappeared. Like nothing else. Like it just kind of disappeared into the film space.
Yeah.
And it was my second feature, and so obviously I was like definitely plagued with the sophomore curse. So and I really didn't know what to do next after that, and so I was like in this space where I was trying to figure that out. And something that hadn't happened to me in a long time, maybe since I was a teenager, happened to me where I just sort of found myself at the beach. And it's something that happened, like I grew up being a kid with a lot of like a huge imagination. Like I used to check out a lot in my head, but as you become more of an adult and you start paying bills, you start living more in the real world. But but this thing happened to me, and I found myself at the beach. And in this beach, what you just saw as the last scene of the movie played out in front of me. I mean, just a young woman walks right past me on the beach and walks towards, almost like she's in a trance-like state, and walks towards the goddess, who I believe to be Mami Wata, because as a child, you grew up, hearing stories about Mami Wata, what she looks like, how there are certain, young girls, young women who are her children, essentially, because their mothers went to her and asked for the fruit of the womb, right? And she would bless such women with child, but eventually she would have to come back to take that child. And usually when that child fulfills their destiny on earth, they have to return back, to whence they came from. And so that scenario played out in my head, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to make a movie about Mami Wata. But I think instinctively I also knew that even though it was a movie about Mami Wata, it wasn't necessarily going to be about Mami Wata, as it would be more about the young woman. And so instinctively, I started to, follow the young woman and like follow her back. Like, where did she come from? And then, I realized she came from a village. She had a mother who is the intermediary. All these things sort of played out in the next 5 years. As I walked through the story and the characters. This was so I had that experience in March 2016, and I had that experience in March 2016, but the movie premiered at Sundance, which is not far from where you guys are, right? I mean, it premiered at Sundance in January 2023, so that was like a 7-year journey of from conception to world premiere. But it was a lot, even the development process was really tough because it was unlike anything I had ever done on a personal, spiritual, I guess, point of view, like just having to dig deeper into self. I spent maybe the first 2 years between 2016 to 2018 just trying to figure out, the script. I must have written maybe 9 to 10 drafts in those years. And then I trashed all of them and started all over again. In 2000 and I think 19 thereabouts. I went to a lab, a film lab in 2018 with the project for the first time because I was like, I really need help.
Right.
And so I went to the lab in Ouaga Film Lab in Burkina Faso. It's one of the finest film labs on the continent. And then, it really did well. And what happened to me was in that, but I always credit this lab, and you probably saw the credit of the lab at the beginning of the film, Ouaga Film Lab. I always credit it to the push that I needed because I really, after writing 9 to 10 drafts, I really didn't know where else to go with the story. And it felt like the more I wrote, the more drafts I wrote, I was writing myself more and more into this sort of genre box. Don't get me wrong, I'm a genre guy. I love genre, but I always knew that the film was supposed to be more than genre. It was supposed to transcend genre.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to do that. And so, but my instincts always got the best of me. So the more I wrote, I would always write traditional genre stuff. Like it was, those drafts felt more like a revenge slasher thriller type film than anything. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm doing here. And so I ended up going to the lab, and the experience I had in the lab was life-changing because as a Nigerian, I tried pitching the film to several people, both funders and whatever, in Nigeria, and the response I always got was always like on the negative side, sometimes even like super, like almost near violent. Like a lady chased us out of their office because, like literally, like you're evil, you're the devil, because there's always this adverse response to spirituality, to traditional spirituality in Nigeria. And so when we went to Ouaga in Burkina, we had a completely different experience. People welcomed us. People were like, "Wow, this is for the culture. This is for the tradition." The young people need to, see themselves. And it was a completely different experience. And so that made me to start rethinking the entire project and start, seeing it in the light of dichotomy, in the light of tradition versus modernity, and how these things sort of like play a role in how we perceive ourselves. So that's how the story took a whole different direction.
We had a person here showing a film a couple of years ago who had what was he from? He was like from Trinidad or someplace like that. We showed his movie and everyone loved it, just like we have this very much, I don't know, maybe there's some people here from Nigeria, but I doubt it. And yet they all love the movie. And the one thing that he said was the more specific kind of culturally something becomes, the more universal it becomes. Have you found that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you speak
Yeah,
to that?
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Because the more specific it is, the more human it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it really delves deeper into the humanity of, and everyone connects to humanity.
Yeah.
It's not about, whether you do a certain practice a certain way. None of these things matter when it comes to humanity. And so I always say, like, I think the bane of um, representation is the fact that we feel that we have to do it like everyone else. Like we have to, like show, like, okay, not to like put anyone on the spot, but Disney could have made Mami Wata instead of the Little Mermaid. You know what I mean? Just as an example, because we have that. And so like it's a different way of looking at things. And I think what that does is that it allows people to experience culture and connect to culture in a very real way rather than in a superficial way, which never works.
Right. Beautiful. Perfect. We got a line here. Come on up, please say your name. Kind of like if you're in an upper division track, you can say that. Whatever you like to say. And do we call you CJ or Fiery?
And whatever, it's fine. It's fine. Either one is fine.
CJ?
CJ
Hey,
or
Raghan. Hey, CJ.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Hi,
My name's Brad.
nice to meet you.
I'm a sophomore here in the program, hoping to go into the directing track. First off,
Awesome.
awesome film. I loved it.
Thank
It
you.
was very visually stunning. Like it looked incredible. And that is kind of goes into my question because the entire film was in black and white. And I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts and what the inspiration or the reasoning behind choosing to color it in the way that you did, because obviously there's the large payoff at the end where there finally is color. So I just would love to hear kind of why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I would say I'm gonna give you a cheesy answer. I didn't decide; it decided for me. It really did. I never saw the film in color for the life of me. In fact, it was more of a struggle trying to see it in color. The black and white was just always there. Like even in the experience I had in March 2016, it played out in front of me all in high contrast, deeply saturated blacks and white. And I think in the early stages, maybe in the first 2 years of my, working on the script, developing it, people would ask me, because every time I pitched it, I would say, I'm making a black and white supernatural thriller. And so people would be like, but why black and white though? And then I would get like super defensive, you know how filmmakers get. I would just be like, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. I really couldn't give a good reason for that. But as I walked deeper and deeper into the project, I realized that it had something to do with my childhood, and just coming back to like the time when our color TV set blew up because lightning struck and destroyed it, and we had this huge black and white TV. And I'm sure you probably don't know, but maybe Dwayne knows, and I'm not saying you're Methuselah or anything. I'm just saying maybe you know. This old black and white TV that goes like this, So we had that, and that became my cinema growing up, and everything I watched and all the films I fell in love with, like falling in love with film as a whole was on that black and white TV. And so, and it always had like this deep palette of black and white. I remember even watching The Evil Dead in black and white. Like I literally got introduced to The Evil Dead in black and white. Until today, even though I've seen The Evil Dead a million times in color since then, till now, I still remember The Evil Dead in black and white. It's somehow imprinted in my subconscious, in my consciousness as in black and white. And a lot of films. And so I think in trying to understand the true story that I wanted to tell in Mami Wata, it made more sense to make it in black and white, because in a lot of ways it's a movie that I had to connect with first on a deep level in order to tell it authentically. So yeah, I mean that's the more deeper answer, but I mean it really looked kick-ass.
Yeah, it really did. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, man.
My name's Wyatt.
Hi, Dwight.
I guess first of all, I loved it. It was amazing.
Thank you.
You've talked a lot about well, your film talks a lot about like spirituality, and you've talked about it. I was just wondering how you, if you do you like filmmaking as a spiritual thing, and how you use spirituality like throughout your process of filmmaking?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I didn't always view filmmaking as a spiritual thing, or maybe I did, but I just didn't know how to access it as a spiritual thing. But certainly making Mami Wata completely changed my point of view about how I see filmmaking and how I see the kind of films that I would like to make. If I had a choice to make films like this, I would always try to find that. I think I was super fortunate with Mami Wata in the sense that it could have gone any direction. But I always held on to this instinct that it can always be more. It can always be more, like something higher than just what anyone would expect from a story like this. And by the way, a lot of people in Nigeria, where I'm from, when they heard that I was making a Mami Wata film, a lot of them thought I was making like a horror film, like because that's the perception you get about when you think of Mami Wata as a Nigerian, despite the fact that within our ethnicities in Nigeria, we all have mermaid deities. Mami Wata is more like the, I guess, the general name in the West African region. But every cultural group, every ethnicity has a name for their mermaid deity. But the thing that always made me, I guess, curious was how, despite the fact that the West African region is so diverse, in Nigeria alone we have over 500 ethnic groups. So imagine Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Mali, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Togo, Benin Republic. All of these countries, they all have different ethnic groups, and they all have a name for mermaid deities. But everyone in this group, despite the fact that you have the francophones and you have the anglophones, it doesn't matter. Everyone recognizes Mami Wata and always Mami Wata. And so that always blew my mind. And I guess in trying to dig deeper into not necessarily the why, but the essence of this fact, which is, obviously rooted in history, in pre-colonialism as well, because, prior to the boundaries that divided us in West Africa, people communicated. People found a way to relate with each other, to interact with each other, because of, there's a commonality in the culture, there's a commonality in the traditions. All of those things existed pre-colonial era. Post-colonial era, you had the Portuguese, you had the French, you had the English. And so a language sort of birthed from that. And that's the language that we now know as Creole or Pidgin. And so I kind of wanted to tap into that era, that essence. That's why, the entire film is in Pidgin, to kind of reimagine a village that exists in this region, that exists, but still stuck in that era. How would they communicate? How would they interact with each other while the rest of the world moves on? So that's why, you have the village, but you still have traces of the present or the future still, dropping into the village. You see Priska, who is obviously straddling both worlds, with a motorcycle, with a very sophisticated way of dressing and things like that. And obviously you see other things like cigarettes, and the fact that the premise of the film is hinged on the fact that, oh, look, every other village is moving forward and we're still stuck here. And so that becomes a representation for anyone who is, not just anyone, like any country or any group of people that is still trying to, I guess, figure out their identity. And so for me, that is what I think makes the project spiritual, not necessarily in the fact that it deals with the spiritual topic of deity or whatever, but just the fact that it makes us look inward. And that's really the kind of cinema that I would love to make more of. Just, because everyone can relate with that. And you don't have to believe in a God or whatever to connect with that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, what's up? My name's
Hey,
Cooper.
man.
I'm
Hi, Cooper.
I'm a sophomore right now, borderline junior. I'm going into the directing track. I think you did great
Sweet.
job, phenomenal. I wanted to ask about because you're talking about how when you were young, like you had a love of film, and I just wanted to know what kind of turned that love of film into what now is like a love for filmmaking. Like, what was that process like?
Oh, that's a great question. The process for me, it was a long and tedious journey. At first, it was just, me rushing back home from school just so I can catch the opening movie. Because then we didn't have like a 24-hour, like we didn't have cable. So we had the local TV stations that would play movies. Usually they would play a movie as the first thing for the day. Sometimes cartoons, but usually they open with a movie and then they close like what they call the late night movie. And then they end transmission till the next day, like 4 p.m. So, rushing back from school, you want to catch that. You want to catch that movie. And so for me, that was like my cinema, coming back from school and opening up the TV, boom, and getting ready to see what pops up there. At some point, a lot of the films that I saw, I really love film. So I used to draw. So I would start like drawing comic renditions of all the films that I loved. And at some point I even started like making them, like trying to make them like really, because I grew up on Marvel and DC like everyone else. That's all I spent my allowance on. But at some point I started trying to make it look like the DC comics, like the comics that I drew. I would use like 4B pencils and then I would retrace them with like marker pencils so they would look like prints. And then I would color them. And then I started trying to sell them to like my peers. And then at some point, people, I got like a fan base for my work. And then people started to try to hear me tell the stories, and then the stories became even more like theater performances, because I would like have renditions, like performances with peers and things like that. I didn't realize that I was directing them in a way, because I was very specific about how I wanted it. Like if they didn't get it right, they had to say it right, they had to hit their marks, things like that. So it really, and I just remember how happy I was, doing all of that. Like it was such a joyful time for me. It was more fun for me than video games, which I loved and all of, but it was more fun for me than any of those things put together. So I didn't know that it was going to be filmmaking, but that was certainly what made me happy. And so growing up, my joy kept going back to those times till I eventually realized what filmmaking was. But I didn't study film in school. So yeah, super lucky. I didn't know how the hell I was going to study film in school, in coming from a small town in Nigeria. So I had this plan in my head where I thought, okay, maybe I would be an author first, like a published author. And then if my books, and just write the stories of the films I wanted to make. And if my books become successful, then I would just like, from the money and that fame, I could just make the movies, make them into movies. That was my plan. And that made more sense to me than trying to be a filmmaker, because I didn't really have any precedents coming from the small town that I grew up, of people who had made it and became filmmakers. But the Igbo people, which is where I'm from, I'm Igbo, which is a tribe in Nigeria. The Igbos are very well known for their storytelling. There's a lot of famous Igbo authors, in the world. You have the Chinua Achebes, you have the Chimamandas. There's so many of them. And so for me, it made more sense to try and follow that path, and then just like branch off into film. But it didn't work out that way. Yeah, but that was the plan. That was the idea. It started from childhood, me playing around with my peers, just having fun, and growing up to realize that this is what I want to do in my life. I studied computer science. That was the degree I got, computer science, and I had a job. I actually started working, but at some point I was like, you know what, I want to make movies, and so I resigned.
That's cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Prince. I'm a
Hi,
junior.
Prince.
I'm a junior in the directing track, and one of the things I was thinking of as I was watching this is there's a lot of elements that come into filmmaking, and as part of that, I wanted to ask that: are there people, like specific people, that you tend to work with on your films, and if so, what impact do they have on you as a filmmaker?
Good question. I guess behind the screen who always is my producer, who is my wife. So she's produced everything I've done. And she has a huge impact because I sort of have to, not I sort of, I have to pitch it to her first. And she was the first person I pitched Mami Wata to, and she was like, yeah, let's make it. And so, and you kind of need somebody like that. I'm not saying you have to marry your producers, but you kind of need someone like that if you want to get anything personal made. Because, like the thing is, filmmaking is a business. And there's a tendency for people to see it more as a business than an art. And so you are the artist. You don't necessarily see it as a business most of the time. So you are coming from a place of, oh, I really want to make this. But you need somebody to help you translate that to the business people so that they can see how viable it is to give you money to go make it, right? So you need that for sure, in one form or the other. What you also need are people who believe in you, right? So I think I've had several people believe in me over, different projects over the years, but I try to work with the same people, from way back. Like, for example, I've worked with the same makeup person. I mean, I had a new makeup person for Mami Wata, but the person who did makeup in my previous work, she did the hair in Mami Wata because she's so good at hair. And I didn't want her to do makeup and hair because, you've watched the film, you see how very specific they are. The makeup is specific, the hair is specific. And I really needed somebody who could do hair. So I was like, I don't want you to do makeup and hair in this film. He's like, why? I've always done makeup and hair in all your films. He's like, I know, but this one I just want you to do hair because I don't know anyone else who can do hair like you can. This is like, yeah, fine. So she was the one who did the hair. And I got someone else to do makeup. But I work with the same person for a lot of the behind the scenes people, like, the same gaffer. Even though the DP usually picks his own gaffer, but I really wanted this gaffer. And I convinced my DOP, who is Brazilian, to work with this gaffer. And she had a fantastic experience working with him. He's really an instinctive guy when it comes to light. A lot of times DOPs don't have, good chemistry with their gaffer. And so they have to like explain and explain and explain and explain. But, because the gaffer has worked with me for a long time, he sort of knows what I like. So when the DOP is explaining, he already knows, he's on it. Like a lot of times the DOP doesn't even need to explain too much. So he's like, he would like a bit of shadow here. He would like, he would like some style here. So he would, like, because I really like cinema. I'm a cinema guy. So I like to, I like it to look cool. I don't like this boring images. I like, when she turns and the light hits her a certain way, or that's the kind of thing I like when it comes to cinema, because that's what I grew up to see. And so I like to infuse my work with that. And sometimes you might have trouble finding people who understand you or who are on that wavelength. But I think that's one great thing about film school. I didn't have that. So I had a lot of trial and error, through the years. But I think, film school is great for things like that, where you find your sort of your own tribe. But yeah, I mean, I think the people you work with it's a make or break. It can really make or break your films. Like the people you work with, the people you align with, the people you have chemistry with. It's really everything, I would say.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Justin, for you.
Hey, good morning.
Hi.
I'm Tracy. I think we all want to see an Evil Dead Mami Wata movie. On that.
Juxtaposed.
Um, I have a question about your characters. They're so, I can't believe you wrote the script like 10 times because your characters are so strong and so individual, all of them. But while I was watching it, I felt like the ocean also was a character, and I don't know if that like came about in post or if you like wrote them in as a character, but I'd love to hear like about the process of the ocean.
Yeah, that's another great question. Definitely, the ocean was always a character because I knew that I wasn't going to show Mami Wata all through the film, even though I didn't notice in the. I mean, in the early drafts, I had Mami Wata like even walking the village. Like I told you, it was like this slash effect. I was like, no, that's not what I'm making here. So yeah, but so I needed, yeah. So I was like in the later when I was thinking, so how do I do that without showing her? So how do I like have the presence of Mami Wata in the village without showing Mami Wata in the village? And so the ocean was one way to do that. Perspectives, in the way we film was another way to do that. But I felt the ocean had to really take on this character form to really deliver that sort of symbolism. And it was there, like it was there in the script. That I wrote it that way, and then I filmed it that way. So we would spend time like just shooting the ocean from different angles, like from different compositions, like just the same way you would treat a character. Once we realized the ocean was a character, we had to treat it like a character. We had to film it a certain way. We had to spend time with it. We had to light it. Like at night, we had to really light the ocean just so we could film it the way we light a character so we can film the character. It was the same thing. It was the same approach. And in post-production, we did the same thing. Once you realize the ocean is a character, what do? You have to decide how much screen time to give the character. How many scenes do you want the character to appear in, and how relevant is the scene to the story? So it was all through the process, of treating the ocean as a character. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like it is a character, even within the spiritual and the mystical way that West Africans, especially coastal villages, view the ocean. Because you don't see Mami Wata, so it is the symbolism of Mami Wata, and so their interaction with the ocean is very different from just your surfer dude in California. It's a very different, it's a very different interaction. They have more of like, this is my essence. This is who I am. This is where we came from in a way. They have this view of this is where we came from, because like I think even like in spiritual, a lot of religions, there's a lot of beliefs that are centered around the world being birthed from the ocean, from the waters. And so yeah, especially in voodoo. I don't know if you know anything about voodoo, the religion, which is practiced in West Africa, especially in Benin Republic, where we shot the film. There's a very high regard of Mami Wata among the pantheons of deities because of this reason, because it's believed that this is where the world, the universe comes from. It's birthed from water. So yeah, we had to really pay specific attention to the ocean and give it her due.
I don't know how you directed the ocean. It was so human. Like,
It played its part. It played its part. It was alive and knew how to hit its own marks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, man.
There we go. That's better. Hey, how's it going? My name's Wes. I
Hi,
just
Wes.
hi and thanks for sharing this with us. I just thought it was so great. You've kind of already answered all my questions just throughout everyone talking, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the score and kind of just the sound design throughout. My interpretation is kind of like the beat that goes through is kind of like Mami Wata's like heartbeat, because she's kind of just always there throughout everything that's going on.
Mhm.
I wanted to just get like your interpretation of that, or Just kind of your thoughts on the sound and the design and things like that.
Oh, yeah, that's I always love when I'm asked about the sound because I feel like it's such an integral part of the story. Um, I went in realizing that at some point, or in most parts, the sound of the film was going to be as important as the visuals of the film. And so with that approach, I mean, it's all the elements. It's the music, it's also the sound design. It's parts where we don't have music. It's even in the silence. You know, all of that is part of the sound. Like deciding to use silence in certain parts can be more powerful than putting sound and all of those things. And so it was all intentional. I worked with a composer, Tunde Jegede. He's really fantastic. He was born, well, he grew up around the griots. I don't know if you know what the griots are. Griots are like the traditional um, musicians from ancient West Africa, who used to like record and tell stories with their instruments, like namely um, the what do you call it? I can't remember what it's called now, but that like the string instrument. So that's what they play with and they record. So it's there in the film. You can actually see the woman who's playing the instruments, and she's taking record of what's happening in the shrine. I mean, there's a little subversion there because for the most part, it's mostly men who do this. But I wanted to use a woman because obviously the village is a matriarch. Uh, but musically, it really had to connect to that. And like I said, I worked with Tunde, who worked with the griots, and I wanted to translate that sound, that griot sound, into the film. But I also wanted to have a modernity because the film isn't just about the old ancient ways. It's also about today. It's also about the present. So I wanted to have an ebb and flow of the old and the new in the sound, in the score. Just like the ocean, the way the ocean moves. I wanted to have that. And the drums came in much later. The idea for the drums came in much later. I didn't think I would have too many drums in the film because it's a slippery slope. Everybody expects an African film to have drums, so I didn't really want to do that. But I realized I had to do it at some point, and I talked to Tunde about it, and he provided just the right drums, which, like you said, it's the heartbeat, and I wanted it to feel like the heartbeat. So it only comes in very specific moments, intense moments, or like in dangerous moments, and so that became almost like just an extra texture rather than just like having drums all through the movie, boom, 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 like so. That was a very specific choice that I made later on during post. And then the rest of the music, I didn't want to have too many soundtracks because it's not a village where people just play music. So you only had like music in the bar, the club, like actual singing in the club. And then one time when Priska is, listening to the radio while she's on the sewing machine. So those are the only two times you hear actual music. The rest is just the score, the drum beats and the sound of the ocean, and other like natural elements like crickets, things like that. And all the atmosphere sound, like the crickets, everything was recorded on location. We didn't use stock sound for anything.
That's awesome. And that's just like props to you. Like, thank you so much. It was just
Yeah.
a great story, and I'm excited for
Pleasure.
what we got cooking next. So thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hello. Hi, my name's Karina.
Hi, your name is
Karina.
Karina. Hi, Karina.
Yeah, I'm a senior here in the directing track. And first of all, I just want to say it was such a visually stunning film. Oh my God, it was so beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
the
Thank you.
performances you got were so good. And my question is, I just want to know generally like how your rehearsal process is, if you have that, or how you just got that out of your characters, because it was so, like, I believed every second of it. It was amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love rehearsals because why do I like rehearsals? I think I just like, I don't know. I think it's just one of those things you do so that you can learn more about how your actors how they've received your script, and you can make corrections at that time, because everybody receives or reads a script and has a different interpretation of it. I don't want to get on set and have to explain things that I feel like we should have already gone past in rehearsal. You know what I mean? So like I want to see all the whatever you want to try it out in rehearsal. I mean, there's always like room to be a bit more, because you feel some kind of energy and you want to experiment a little bit. But for the most part, you want, at least for me, I want to have control of the set. I want to know what's going to happen. When I'm shooting a film, I only maybe like sit behind on the screen when I'm sure I've gotten everything I want. You know what I mean? Like I like to feel the energy as well. But the thing is, with the rehearsal we did, we arrived like weeks before the shoot, and we had weeks of rehearsal. We had at least 2 weeks, and then we ended up having 2 more weeks, which we didn't plan. So we rehearsed way more than we planned to do, because we had an issue on set where the partner we had, the equipment partner, pulled out while we were on location, and so we were screwed. Like we were really screwed. Like so. We ended up having more time to rehearse because production started looking for, equipment to rent. And we never planned to rent equipment because we had an equipment partner. And so that took another 2 weeks before we could find another equipment company on short notice and have it shipped from Nigeria to Benin Republic. So that was a long time. It was a long process to get the permits and all of that. But yeah, it allowed us to really like rehearse the heck out of the out of the thing, and like everything was rehearsed, the dancing, like even the fight. At some point we had a choreographed fight scene, and then I was like, I don't want to do any of these things, and then we started like trying to figure out how to make it not look choreographed. That was the point. We like just like, how do you make it like scrappy and messy? Because in real fights don't look like John Wick. They only look like that in movies. So in real life fights, they are over in like 2 minutes. Because somebody always gets knocked out like really quick. So I wanted to have that kind of scrappiness like in the fights, and also because I wasn't making an action movie, so I wasn't gonna do like all that choreographed. We had that initially. The stunt coordinator had like a more choreographed fight. I'm like, no, we're not gonna do. Let's mess it up. Let's make it like really ugly, So yeah, we had time to do a lot of rehearsals. I think rehearsals are important, and I would always strongly advise for it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you.
If we have one more person, if that's all right. You have to adjust this again.
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Brandon. I'm
Hi,
probably
Brandon.
the editing track, the UVU. I was wondering, what was the motivation behind your?
Did you say you're on the editing track?
Yeah,
Okay. Cool.
probably. I was wondering, what was the motivation behind your cameras? Some of them were handheld, well, a lot of them were handheld, and a lot of them were just very static, and
Yeah.
like it wasn't moving at all. And I was wondering, like, why that choice? Why have the choice to have the camera almost never move?
Yeah. So we were going to have maybe, I would say, 70% static shots. Like that was the original intent. I don't know the exact percentage, but it was supposed to be more static shots and less camera movement. But when we had some constraints, especially with the equipment and stuff. I was like, okay, I'm gonna rethink this whole thing, and so I decided to flip it. And so when you have the static shots, and I think it works pretty well because instead of having the effect of, okay, it's mostly static, and then when it gets wobbly, people know that it's tense or whatever, which is what most people do, I guess, in the film. It made me rethink the whole thing. So now it's the opposite. Not mostly it's handheld. When it's static, then you feel something a little bit more like a higher power or a presence. So I think it worked pretty well. And once we realized that that was the template, we just sort of ran with it. And then all we had to think about was the actors hitting their marks, because if we still wanted to have movement in the handheld, we didn't want to just randomly just follow them. It's a black and white film, and so the intentionality of the lighting had to even be more present. We have to be more technical with the lighting. You don't just want them walking off out of the light. You know what I mean? So we had to really figure all of these things out. And yeah, it was really intended to provoke this sort of visceral feeling to it. I wanted people to really be with them when they are moving, when they're not moving. And so when you have the static shots, it gives you the time to sort of reflect what you're seeing and to have more of a feeling of a higher presence when you see it. So that was really what we decided, and we ran with it.
I noticed that you had the handheld when you wanted us to be with the people in the shot, and whenever it was static, it was more like we're looking at something happening.
Yes. Yes. Which is usually the opposite in most films.
Yeah.
Whenever something is important, that's when they do the handheld. And you're like, but I can't see it. I can't see it, so we wanted to flip that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I had just one last question before we let you go and live your life. And I was just wondering about your camera. I was wondering if you shot in a digital monochrome camera like the red, or if you shot color and colorized or desaturated.
Yeah, so we shot on a RAW, an Arri Alexa mini camera, and it was RAW. And RAW it's not necessarily color, and it's not black and white either. But all the monitors we had, so my monitor, the set monitor, and the makeup monitor, everyone's monitor was all calibrated black and white. So nobody, if you wanted to look at color, you would have to look at it look at them directly. Yeah. But through the monitors, everything was in black and white. Everything was calibrated for black and white. And so we really went in with the intentionality of making a black and white film. Not a film that would have, not the chrome version, because people do color and then they do a chrome version. No, not a chrome version. The whole movie is in black and white. And it really taught me a lot, I would say, because, there's the mindset that if you're making a black and white film, it's a black and white film, so coloring doesn't matter. On the contrary,
yeah,
in black and white film, that's when the color matters even more, I would say, especially with the specific kind of black and white film we were making with, deeply saturated blacks and, these very clear midtones. All of these things had to be taken into consideration as far back in the pre-production, in choosing the fabric, for the costumes. There were certain colors of fabric and palettes that we would never touch because we did the tests. We did the test in pre-production, like yellows. We mostly stayed away from yellows. We mostly stayed away from greens, because when you convert those colors, they give you very bland gray colors. And we wanted the punchy stuff. So we would go for the navy blues, the purples. If we wanted mid-tones, we would go for red. So we were very intentional all through about the color choices, even though it's a black and white.
It's interesting because you mentioned black and white TVs and made a joke that maybe I remember them, and you I actually had a memory that I haven't thought of probably since forever. And that is sitting as a child watching The Wizard of Oz with
Yeah,
my dad on a black and white TV and him explaining why Dorothy going into Munchkinland was so incredible. Because I was just watching her going from a black and white Kansas to black and white, Oz, and
yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
And that memory came when you said that. It was just like this weird
Yeah.
flash. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure. It was a beautiful film. Thank you so much for sharing, guys. Give me a big round of applause.
Appreciate it, guys. Can you turn the laptop so I can see them and wave? Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate, guys. Thank you.
Best of luck on whatever you get to do next. And we're all going to be following you and look forward for great things. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate it.